Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our exciting panel discussion on ocean health. We're looking at the role of diversity and its correlation to sustainability, and also looking at how that can drive solutions for our seas and oceans. I'm Jonquil Hackenberg, Global Head of Sustainability and Climate Response at PA Consulting. And on that theme of unlikely partnerships, I have an exciting group of people here. I'll let them introduce themselves.
Thanks, Jonquil, and it's great to be here. I'm Duncan Burt. I'm Chief Sustainability Officer for National Grid, and we're really involved in the growth of offshore wind, hence the slightly unlikely link with us today.
And I'm Andrew Burrows. I head up our technology and innovation in our energy and utilities practice. My background is naval architecture as well as energy transition and sustainability.
And I am Anne-Cécile Turner. I'm the Sustainability Director of the Ocean Race. And we've launched a program called Racing with Purpose to include sustainability in racing.
Thank you very much, everyone. So with that, let's start the first question. So looking at the role of diversity in all that you're trying to do, Anne-Cécile, starting with the ocean race, let's talk about the sailing industry. Let's talk about how archaic it is, quite frankly, in terms of gender in particular, but diversity overall. What's the ocean race looking at in terms of the correlation between sustainability and diversity?
So we've done some research and analysis, thanks to PA Consulting, and the outcome is quite worrying. The numbers of sailing practitioners are decreasing. I think if it's a question of survival, so if we don't include diversity and inclusion in our sport, I mean, the sport is really in trouble. So it's quite a worrying subject. And the Ocean Race, for the first time, the last edition, has promoted positive discrimination by changing the rules of the game, allowing 18 female sailors to sail on board last time, including 2 winners, and it never happened before. So I think we're really trying to open the path for female sailors.
I think that's really important, and I think the link maybe with sponsorship and sport in particular, I think that's something that's going to drive both sustainability and gender. I think if sport's not, if there's no correlation between that, then sponsorship is going to die away, which is why the sport's going to die away. It's not going to be relevant anymore. So I'd be interested to explore that a bit more. Duncan, tell me what's your perspective?
Yeah, so for us, I mean, over the next 20 years, we've got an absolutely enormous build-out of infrastructure across our footprint in the UK and the US, and we are not going to be able to build that unless we are well integrated and have got really high empathy with the communities that infrastructure is going into and that we're working with. So we've set ourselves targets around gender for 50-50, both at a senior level and then right the way through our graduate programs and such like. And we are pretty much there already.
Amazing, congratulations.
And we have almost no gender pay gap, which is obviously a really core component of that as well in our UK reporting. Alongside that, we've got a target over the next 3 or 4 years to really ensure that we do reflect the communities that we're operating in, right through the major operating units of the business. And again, that's so that when we arrive in cities, towns and villages to begin those discussions, that we've got people that understand that situation, that can speak to the various communities that are there. And when we're doing all the detailed design, strategy, thinking back in the office, that we have all of those viewpoints coming in. So gender, wider diversity, both in terms of background and social mobility and everything else, are really, really core to being the organisation that we need to be in order to get this done.
That's fantastic. Just building back, actually, Anne-Cécile, on that, just maybe talk a bit about the villages, in terms of the race villages, how that's building in. I think sailing's often seen as a posh, privileged sport, and I think, you know, just to take that angle, is that true? Do we think that's true?
Well, unfortunately, it's probably true in many areas, but I think we want to make an effort for our race village to be as inclusive as possible. So first, they are free. It's a very strong general public attendance. Last time it was like 2.5 million visitors across the world, so it's quite significant. And we want to welcome families. We have an education program for the kids from 6 to 12. We have we really want to be a platform for sustainable innovation in our race villages. We are small organizations, in each host cities, but we are tackling all the issues such as waste, energy, attendance, and all the flow of material and unmaterial issues. We want to treat them as sustainable as possible. So that's a very interesting journey. And we're also facing different types of cultures around the world. So integrating different types of cultures is also a strong knowledge within the organization.
That's fantastic. Andrew, from a technology perspective, as we're trying to solve for new problems, we can't obviously solve with old leadership. How can technology help in that role?
So I guess from a physical accessibility, first of all, when it comes to designing a boat, you need to consider the physical nature, both of operating the vessel, but also from building the vessel perspective. So that starts at the design phase, really understanding what the requirements are, and then designing your boat to make it easy for both genders to operate the vessel, so you don't have these winch gorillas who are grinding away at the winches. You don't require that, but also when it comes to building the boat, that it doesn't require great physical strength to assemble the boat, to move the components. So the naval architect, the yacht designers, at that stage, they need to be considering it right from the beginning, right from the requirements. If it's a race boat, for example, or any other commercial vessel, right from the very beginning, how do we make the boats more accessible from a physical perspective? And there is every opportunity to do that.
I just think it's an interesting angle that lots of people won't consider, is that physical angle of a lot of sport as well, that just changes the game and uplifts gender parity. Talking about things that you wouldn't normally consider, so unlikely partnerships. Just moving on to a bit about, ocean health, green generation. How do those two things come together? Duncan, talk to me about that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would question that, but actually it's a really, really fundamental bit of it. So, as you guys will know, a huge part of delivering a zero carbon economy is a massive build out, particularly in Northern Europe, of offshore wind. And we're going right into the North Sea with our cables and with partners who are building wind turbines out there. And so that brings to the fore many different issues to do with the ocean environment that are really, really important. So obviously we're digging up the seafloor to put cables in. We're trying to understand where it's best to locate infrastructure. And then there are the ongoing impacts, both in the environment and in the local communities of that infrastructure being there. So a few key points. So firstly, we're really determined that we will be nature positive within our impact. So we will leave the overall ecosystem better than it was when we went into it. So that requires really understanding scientifically what's going on, making sure that we are being very careful as we go into that environment to make sure, and we do work around our infrastructure in that region to make sure that as we go, that ecosystem is healthier than it was when we started. Now that's just the environmental bits. Obviously there's a huge overlap as well between offshore wind and fishing and the fishing industry. And the fishing industry is politically really important. Many people define their identity around their local community, and fishing is a really, really core part of that. So understanding the impact on fishing, both large trawlers and other large industrial fishing, and of course day fishing and sailing as well, are really, really key to being able to demonstrate that we're working with the local community, that we're going with the grain of the local economy, and we are, again, leaving the environment and their economic position healthier than it was when it found it. So it does seem unlikely, but actually it's really, really vital to getting the green revolution done in offshore wind over the next 10 years, so that we can actually get to the zero carbon future.
I love the term nature positive. I think it's great, and I think what's really interesting about your approach is you're looking at sustainability holistically, rather than we'll install some offshore wind and everything's going to be healthy. It's thinking of the unintended consequences before you start. I think is really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anne-Cécile, talk to me about that from an ocean health perspective. So we see the ocean race as kind of a sailing event, but actually, as you said, it's about a race with purpose. So from an ocean health perspective, what are you doing to address that could be an unlikely partnership?
So we started last edition of the race a science program as an example of our programmatic approach, and we equip the boats with scientific device that helps capture ocean data. sea surface temperature, microplastic pollution, CO2. And the idea here is really, testing the vitals of the ocean, understand how healthy it is, contributing to the bigger network of database of information in an open source manner is very important for us, not only because of the data, but also because it helps to raise awareness on the issue of ocean health, which is it's our playground, it's threatened, and we really want to use the platform of the race to make the general public understand the value of the ocean and it needs for protection. And so the ocean, the sailors are also becoming, citizen scientists and advocate, to pass the message forward, and they have a voice. So we really want to use our voice to create that, an awareness platform, an education platform for primary schools, secondary schools, and adults. So really by increasing ocean literacy, it's also a very strong element for people to understand, sometimes ocean can feel far away from you, specifically when we talk about where we're going in the Southern Ocean, it's so remote that you can really understand and you can picture where it is. But in fact, if you don't pay attention to the ocean, it's your life on Earth which is threatened. It's your capacity to breathe, which is threatened. So that's very important. And we also have a series of ocean summits, so 12 ocean summits around the world, raising awareness and encouraging best practice and action commitments for the ocean.
So maybe just talk about where exactly does the ocean race go? Because I guess you're going into typically unexplored territory, which is why it can contribute to a bigger understanding of the possibilities with ocean and technology, I think.
It's a very topical question at the moment because the COVID has forced us to change the route a little bit. So before we were going to 10 different host cities around the world. So it's a round the world sailing race with stopovers everywhere. We're starting from Spain. We're going around the world, around the Southern Ocean, up to Cape Town first, Southern Ocean, up to Brazil, and ending in Europe with several stopovers in Europe. So we really have a really good picture of, the status of the ocean, the different ecosystem around the world, and the idea is really to push that knowledge further across, the platform that we have through the media attention and through the world leaders as well.
So Andrew, the role of technology and innovation, all of that, and connecting, for example, what Duncan's driving at Grid, what you're able to provide from Ocean Race, in looking at that innovation opportunity, where do you see the industries that would be linked and interested in that, and what sort of technology can help in all of that?
Well, I think what Cécile has just described is very exciting. So change requires actionable insight, and actionable insight requires data, and what you're doing is generating data. So I think that's very exciting. So if all vessels were equipped with sensoring that captured data of the ocean health, and you can imagine a roadmap where the data just gets richer and richer, where we gather data about what fish populations might be, or the diversity of the fish populations, along with the other data for example, microplastics. If sensoring could be developed so that it's inexpensive, so that it's robust, so that it's accurate, that it can be placed on all vessel types, and it's great that you're leading the charge in that space, and gathering that data into a centralized open source platform where people can collaborate to fuse that data to get that actionable insight for us to monitor the impact that we are having on the planet's oceans and find ways of identifying the causes and identifying the opportunities to reduce our impacts. I think that's very exciting. So yes, it's all about censoring, low cost, high accuracy, high robustness, reliability, and bringing that data up to central digital repositories that can be accessed by a multitude of different use cases.
That's brilliant, thank you. And I guess in looking at that data collection, that just allows us to accelerate change to a certain extent. So what do we need to do to accelerate change? How do we do this faster and better?
No, that's right. I mean, when we're talking to ecosystem organisations, charities who are really looking at this, many of them are now pointing towards the oceans rather than land because of the impact that ocean health can have in both embedding carbon and sequestering it and in improving the ecosystem of the world. So we are really interested in this from the point of view of our own reporting. So we want to be able to report clearly that we're nature positive and that we have the transparency and the information and the data behind that to be able to back up our analysis, and that's a lot of monitoring, it's a lot of data, and that aligns with the principles that we've been learning through TCFD, again, all of the future reporting that we'll do through things such as science-based targets for nature are going to drive increasing amounts of importance into really being able to understand what is going on in that ecosystem, how it's changing, and hopefully how it's improving.
Absolutely. Andrew, what's your perspective on accelerating change?
I guess we have to have the policy drivers, the regulatory drivers that influence the flow of money that then makes the adoption of these technologies and the scaling of these technologies possible. So that's my interest area. What can we do to accelerate the policy drivers that accelerate that technology?
Yeah, fair enough. Anne-Cécile?
Yeah, for me that's a major constraint that we have. It's getting too slow. We're not fast enough in being able to change the system. So I think for me, our system has been built on siloism, on expertise and performance, but on specific issues. And for me, the best way to accelerate change is to create a collaboration platform, create bridges, create links, exchange knowledge, and making sure that it's a complete paradigm shift that we need to operate. It's difficult. Change is difficult to happen, but we really need to power our world leaders talking at the moment and hoping the outcome of the discussion will be positive to accelerate change at scale and at speed.
I think you're right in terms of looking at bridges rather than silos. In the bridges lies the complexity, but in the complexity lies the opportunity. And I think looking, the link between carbon and water, we've just published our report on carbon and water, and the correlation between decarbonisation, the opportunity that the ocean provides, and all of that. You mentioned, sequestering, etc. The challenges we're trying to solve around climate response are so huge. There's enough for everyone to play. I think the opportunity lies in everybody focusing on what they're really good at and what they can contribute with, and then partnering everywhere else. The opportunity that we see around carbon and water, the report that we've just published, and looking at sustainability and climate response strategies that are much more holistic, like you mentioned, Duncan, yes, I think are really, really critical. So if we start to build that out, partnerships, not silos, focusing on what we're really good at, I think there's a massive opportunity along the way. So thank you very much all for attending today. Great discussion, and that concludes our panel.